Abba Father, our creator, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, the creator of all universe, the creator of all things, we look to you this afternoon. We look to you in a collective body of people of humanity to come to American Canyon on behalf of you that has given us life and given us hope and then given us the spring in our step, that we can celebrate a wonderful time together, but we're also celebrating a Juneteenth festival, and this is the first annual in American Canyon. We pray that we can bring the community together, no matter what faith, no matter what culture, ethnicity, we are all one under your canopy of humanity. Amen? So we ask that this afternoon be filled with not only entertainment, but with education, empowerment, and enlightenment. And Lord, we pray that everyone who's associated here today will enjoy the time together and understand that Juneteenth is really a day of that emancipation that had been done 2 years prior, but it is still the freedom that was so dearly needed for us as a people to expand our hope, to expand our faith, and expand our creativity. So we thank you, we praise you, we glorify you, our Creator, and it's in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, in the name of the Holy Spirit, and everybody said, hallelujah! So let's get this thing rolling this afternoon. A spiritual is a type of religious folk song that is most closely associated with the enslavement of African people in the American South. The songs proliferated in the last few decades of the 18th century, leading up to the abolishment of legalized slavery in 1860s. The African American spiritual, also called the Negro spiritual, constitutes one of the largest and most significant forms of American folk. Famous spirituals include Sweet Load, Sweet Chariot, composed by Wallace Willis, and Deep Down in My Heart. The term spiritual is derived from King James Bible translation from Ephesians 5:19, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. The form has its roots in the informal gatherings of African slaves and praise houses, an outdoor meeting called the brush arbor meeting, bush meetings, camp meetings in the early 18th century. At the meetings, participants would sing and chant and dance and sometimes enter ecstatic trances. Spirituals also stem from the ring shout, shuffling of circular dance to the chanting and the hand clapping that was common among the early plantations and the slaves. And an experiment and an example of spiritual song is in this style, Jesus Leads Me All the Way, sung by Reverend Goodwin and the Zion Methodist Church organization and recorded by Henrietta Yuchenko in 1970. In Africa, music had been the central to people's lives. Music making permeated important life events and daily activities. However, the white colonists of North America were alarmed and frowned upon the slaves' African-infused way of worship because they considered it to be idolatrous and wild. As a result, the gatherings were often banned and had to be conducted in a clandestine manner. The African population in the American colonies had initially been introduced to Christianity in the 17th century. An uptake of the religion was relatively slow at first, but the slave population was fascinated by the biblical stories containing parallels to their own lives and created spirituals that retold narratives about biblical figures like Daniel and Moses and the others. As Africanized Christianity took hold of the slave population, spirituals served as a way to express the community's new faith as well as its sorrows and hopes. And last, spirituals are typically sung in call and response form, with a leader improvising a line of text and a chorus of singers providing a solid refrain in unison. The vocal style abounded in free-form slides, turns, and rhythms that were challenging for early publishers of spirituals to document accurately. Many spirituals known as sorrow songs are intense and slow and melancholic. Songs like "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child" and "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen" describes the slave's struggles and identification, the suffering of Jesus Christ. Other spirituals are more joyful, known as jubilees or camp meeting songs. They are fast, rhythmic, and often syncopated. Examples included "Rocking My Soul in the Bosom of Abraham," "Fare Ye Well." Spirituals are also sometimes regarded as codified protest songs. Songs like "Steal Away" was the Underground Railroad. And because the Underground Railroad of the mid-19th century used terminology from railroads as secret language for assisting slaves to freedom, it is often speculated that songs like "I Got My Ticket" and may have been a code for escape. Take time to find a little bit more about the background of spirituals. It's in depth, and it is a part of our spiritual blood and faith and courage to escape slavery to freedom. Now, as we get ready to transition, as we talk about spirituals, I have the privilege of introducing my comrades who are behind me, who will come now, the Allen Temple Male Chorus from Oakland, California, where our pastor is Dr. Reverend Jacqueline A. Thompson, under the director of Dr. Alvin McLean. We're going to come with a few renditions from the spiritual side of this presentation.
Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Satan's a liar and a conjure too. If you don't watch out, he'll conquer you. If I could, I surely would just stand on the rock where Moses stood. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Shout, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock, coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock coming up. Elijah Rock coming up. Elijah Rock coming up. Lord, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord.
There is a
balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul.
There is a
balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul.
Sometimes I feel discouraged and feel my works in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a
balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul.
If you cannot preach like Peter, if you cannot pray like Paul, you can say the love of Jesus and say he died for all. There is
a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sick soul. To heal the sick soul. To heal the sick soul.
The African American gospel music is a form of euphoric, rhythmic, spiritual music rooted in the solo and responsive church singing of African American South. Its development coincided with and is germane to the development of rhythm and blues. The precursor to black gospel music is the African American spiritual, which had already been around for well over a century before gospel music began its rise to popularity starting around the 1930s. Songs written by African American composers in the decades following emancipation that focused on biblical themes and often drew from spirituals were the source of development of gospel. An example is The Gospel Cause by a popular composer, Sam Lucas. When many African American communities migrated from the rural to urban life during the first half of the 20th century, they brought their worship culture with them. Echoing the ways of the single-room churches and the agrarian South, the storefront churches of the northern cities became the key setting for development of the gospel. During the 1930s, gospel music emerged from the coalescing of three types of musical activity. A, the hymn style of Charles Albert Tindley from 1851 to 1933, a Philadelphia minister who composed hymns based on Negro spirituals, adding instrumental accompaniments, improvisations, and blues-filled third and seventh intervals. B, the minimalist solo song, rural gospel tunes that appeared as a counterpart to the rural blues, and the uninhibited, exuberant worship style of the holiness Pentecostal branch of the Christian church. A key figure in the development of gospel was Thomas Dorsey, in 1899 through 1993, referred today as the father of gospel music. Dorsey pioneered the form in Chicago, and before devoting his career to the development of gospel, Dorsey, the son of a Georgia Baptist preacher, was a prolific blues and jazz composer and pianist. The energetic rhythms and primal growls of secular music heavily influenced Dorsey's sacred composing style. Now, from the beginnings, gospel music challenged the existing church establishment. Black religious leaders originally rejected Dorsey's approach because of its association with widely frowned upon secular music styles of the era, such as ragtime and blues and jazz. And Thomas Dorsey teamed up with the vocalist Mahalia Jackson, who, like him, had been exposed during her formative years to the Baptist church and the sounds of blues artist Bessie Smith and others. Together, Dorsey and Jackson bypassed the establishment and took their new Christian sound to the street corners of Chicago and elsewhere around the country. Jackson sang Dorsey's songs while composer hawked copies of his sheet music. Eventually, Dorsey and Jackson's vision spread through their alliance with a few like-minded musical pioneers to form the National Convention Gospel Choirs and Choruses, still thriving today. And as you know, a lot of our gospel music obtained the derivative from those who struggled, for those who found a path of faith, to take music and to create it and to bring it to life so that it permeates down in our spirit. Hearing from Mahalia Jackson and hearing from all of those going back and those
Come on, put your hands together right there. Somebody call God. Say when I call your name. Come on, I can't hear you. When I call on your name. Say when I call you. When I call your name, Lord. Hey, come on, somebody just call his name right there. Hallelujah. I'd come to declare that if you call his name, he'll show up. Hallelujah. He can show up right here at the park. Hallelujah. Yee. Y'all making a little bit of noise. All right, this is original right here. I don't know about you, but I come to clap my hands. Hallelujah. Can you just put your hands together right there? Hey! The song says, I don't know what you come to do.
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 I don't know what
Hey.
you come to do.
I come to clap my hands. Come on, put those hands together right there. I come to do my dance.
I come to do my dance.
I come to lift him up, yeah, yeah. I come to lift him up. Ooh. I don't know what you come to do.
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 I don't know what you come to do. I don't know what you come to do.
I don't know what you come to do.
I come to clap my hands.
I come to clap my hands.
I come to do my dance. Somebody got to dance out there.
Do my dance.
I come to lift him up. I come to lift him up. Ooh. I don't know what you come to do. Hey. I don't know what you come to do.
I don't know what you come to do.
I don't know what you come to do.
What you come to do.
I don't know what you come to do. Hey. Who is the King of glory?
I'm not strong and mighty.
Who is the King of glory?
Lord God mighty and fair.
Who is the King of glory?
Lord God strong
Hey.
and mighty.
Who is the King of glory?
Lord God mighty and fair.
Help me praise Him for every way that He made. I gotta praise Him,
Praise Him.
praise Him.
Praise Him.
Come on and praise Him. You gotta lift your hands. Come on and praise Him. Hey. Who is the King of glory?
The Lord God strong and mighty.
Who is the King of glory?
The Lord God mighty and fair.
Who is the King of glory?
The Lord God
praise him. Help me. I gotta give him the glory. I gotta clap my hands. Hey, I gotta clap my hands. Hey, I gotta do my dance. Come on and do your dance. Lift him. Come on and lift him higher. Hey, above your problem. Hey, above your fear. Come on and lift him. I gotta lift him higher. He's high and lifted. And trained to the temple. Come on, lift him. You gotta lift him. Come on, lift him higher. Come on, lift him higher. 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 Come on, lift him higher. He's worthy. Who is the King of glory? Ooh, yeah. Come on, somebody knows that he's the King of glory. Hallelujah.
Right now, I'm bringing Dora Smith, correct, to the stage, who will introduce the producer of today's first annual Juneteenth Festival. Dora Smith, come on, give it up for her.
Good afternoon, and what a celebration. Our celebration of freedom, and now a recognized national holiday as led by 95-year-old Opal Lee. To carry on the legacy this afternoon is our mistress of ceremony, Brenda Knight. This initial first annual celebration here in American Canyon is the vision of our mistress of ceremonies. Brenda has been a trailblazer in many arenas, which has offered her to being the first. So she's been a first in several arenas. Brenda was the first female baseball coach in Oakland Babe Ruth history. She went on to become the first female president of the Oakland Babe Ruth baseball. And as president of the league, she changed the whole fabric of the league.
Yes.
There goes that first again.
Beautiful.
In the middle of East Oakland, the ball field became a family-oriented gathering place, including putting on the first parade ever in East Oakland. And the second year, not only was there a parade, but the first opening ceremony was held, and it was broadcast on every Bay Area TV station. Another first. Brenda ran a grassroots campaign and became an elected official with the Peralta College Board, succeeding also as the president of the board. During this election period, she became the first Black woman to hold the title of chairman of the board of the National Association of Community Colleges throughout the United States. There goes that first again. By the way, ladies in red, Living and Loving Life also evolved from Brenda's grassroots campaign. We see you out there, ladies in red. Give yourself a round of applause. Let's go, sisters. Brenda has been honorary commander at the Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield, California, Oakland's Woman of the Year. She also has received the Jefferson Award from KPIX Channel 5, and all of these were from her commitment to community service. And now today, Brenda, as the proprietor of Brenda Knight Events and the visionary of this first annual Juneteenth celebration being held here in American Canyon with all the glitz and glamour, along with family orientation that only Brenda can bring to a celebration. And by the way, there goes that first again. I present to you your mistress of ceremonies this afternoon, Brenda Knight.
Let's do it like this. Hey,
Here we go! Here we go! Hey, you showed up today! What's up, what's up? I'm here to please you. We're here to have a good time today. I see you over there. Because you showed up today. We ready to have a good time. This is Juneteenth. Freedom, everybody. Are you ready? We ready to have a good time. You showed up. I see you, Calvin. Hey now. Hey, family. Hey, you showed up. You showed up.
Trick me.
You showed up.
Trick me.
Yeah. Hey, I see you over there. You showed up. Thank you, Linda and Delma. You showed up. I see you. You showed up. I am so glad. So glad to have you here. All right, now, are you ready? We're getting ready to have a good time today, celebrating Juneteenth, our freedom. We have a lot of entertainers for you today. We hope you enjoyed the gospel hour. And doing this, I got all congested because this morning we had the sprinklers on and my feet got soaked and wet and I wasn't even having a pedicure. I said, what's up with this? But I'm gonna be all right because you here, because you showed up. We're gonna start our program off. This is in partnership with the American Canyon Arts Foundation. So now I'd like to bring up our president of the American Canyon Arts Foundation, Clarence Magro.
My name is Clarence Mammerell. I'm president of the American Canyon Arts Foundation, and I'm honored, very honored, to welcome you all to the American Canyon's first annual Juneteenth celebration. Let's first acknowledge the tremendous efforts of our friend Brenda Knight and Brenda Knight Events. Brenda. This celebration started as a great idea, and Brenda and her Juneteenth committee turned it into a reality. Thank you. All are welcome today, and I'm especially thankful to have a heart-to-heart with our African American brothers and sisters. I enjoy public speaking, but I will never be as eloquent as our esteemed guests, especially past Mayor Ben Anderson, Mr. Paul Cobb, Ms. Regina Mason, Dr. Sarah Rush, and Mr. Orlando Harris. I'm an experienced musician, but I simply don't have the musical talent to play gospel, jazz, and blues music with the reverence, feelings, and energy of our featured performers. Here's why. As a Filipino-American immigrant whose family fled a Philippine dictatorship for a new life in the United States in 1971, my experience in America, while certainly challenging, could never and will never compare to the past and present experiences of you, our African American brothers and sisters. Your eloquency, your creativity are born from centuries of hardship, which I could never imagine. The beauty which comes from your courage and resiliency is unmatched in history. Today, you share your history, culture, and music in the city of American Canyon, right here. And we are truly blessed, truly blessed. Just look around. Your example inspires us all, and this Juneteenth celebration is your day. Everyone gives ourselves a hand for that. But tomorrow my heart aches because I'm reminded that this country, a country we love so dearly, a country with hardwired promises of equity and freedom, has, in many places, systems which actively seek to harm the African American community in many ways, politically, physically, mentally, and financially. So today I ask myself, and invite all communities and cultures to ask themselves, what can we do to honor the spirit of Juneteenth? My answer is this. I will reflect on the importance of this day. I will take your inspiration into my heart and embrace it. And I promise to love you, my brothers and sisters, because love is truly the only way we will lift ourselves up from that which seeks to divide us and bring the spirit of Juneteenth into tomorrow and into our future. Thank you very much.
And I would like at this time to call up our mayor of American Canyon, the man who, when I moved here 17 years ago, became a good friend. The man who used to come and eat my barbecue ribs in my backyard, celebrated all my kids, not my kids, my grandkids' birthdays, and treat my mom and husband like family. So at this time, I would like to present to you the mayor of American Canyon, Mayor Leon Garcia.
And those were good ribs, too. Welcome. My goodness, this is great. This is wonderful. On behalf of the City Council and the City of American Canyon, I welcome all of you to American Canyon. I hope you're enjoying the festival and this very great day. This is the first Juneteenth celebration in Napa County, and we're proud to be part of that because it reflects our city. And in that note, I have a proclamation prepared to celebrate this moment and to present to Brenda Knight. Juneteenth, Independence Day. Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation declaring that all enslaved people in rebellious states would be then and henceforth forever free. And whereas President Lincoln believed slavery to be a violation of the principles of the Declaration of Independence, and that its abolition represented a new birth of freedom for the United States. And whereas, although President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation freeing slaves on January 1863, it was not until June 19, 1865, that Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, announcing the end of the Civil War and bearing federal orders proclaiming the end of slavery in the South, in the southwestern United States. And whereas Juneteenth, or Juneteenth Independence Day, has a special meaning to African Americans, which combines the words of June 19th, commemorating the traditional observance of the end of slavery in the United States, and it's observed annually on June 19th. And whereas Juneteenth is an important opportunity to honor the principles of the Declaration of Independence and celebrate the achievement and contributions of African Americans have made and continue to make in the city of American Canyon and across our nation. And whereas June 19, 2022, in partnership with the American Canyons Arts Foundation, the City of American Canyon will be celebrating Juneteenth, Main Street Park, from 1 to 6 p.m. This unforgettable community event will be celebrated African American heritage, history, and freedom through cultural ceremonies, activities that reflect the power of the community, family, arts, and tradition. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Leon Garcia, Mayor of the City of American Canyon, on behalf of the City Council, do proclaim June 19, 2022 as Juneteenth Independence Day. In celebration of this day, I encourage the City of American Canyon community to attend the Juneteenth community event on June 19, 2022, right here in Main Street Park. Thank you.
I want to congratulate you for an amazing event, and I want to congratulate the American Canyon Arts Foundation, and the City of American Canyon. And this is because you guys are the first city in Napa County to proclaim Juneteenth, which is, there you go. And we're happy to say that last year, President Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day as a federal national day. And this is to remind everybody across the United States that Juneteenth exists, and it's here, and it needs to be celebrated across the United States. So thank you for having us. I have a certificate for the American Canyon Arts Foundation and the City of American Canyon. So I'll present this one to you. And I will present this to Mayor Leon Garcia. And thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all. I know I was just hearing Myra's words just now, and I was like, this is a holiday that we all need to learn how to celebrate. I think some of us have been doing it for a very long time, but there's so many more that need to be educated about it and this experience, and I'm very glad that we now have this as a recognized federal holiday. And for those of you that come in out of town, coming to American Canyon for the first time, thank you for being here. Come back and visit us anytime. It's a great, wonderful community. We'd love to have you. I'm very honored today to actually speak on behalf of the California State Legislature from Assembly Member Cecilia Aguirre Curry and our State Senator Bill Dodd. They present to you all the Certificate of Recognition presented to American Canyon Juneteenth celebration. And it's here. There you go. So thank you very much.
I want to take another opportunity to thank Brenda Night Events, and the Arts Foundation for bringing us all together. And I think it's really important to not just celebrate today, but to stand with our community, to understand what today means. And I want to share with you that it was a very proud moment for me last year to be able to work with our labor unions at the County of Napa to recognize Juneteenth as a paid holiday for all county employees in the County of Napa. That is putting our money where our values are, and I am very proud of that. And to join with that, this will be an annual proclamation that we will be presenting on behalf of the County of Napa. And while many of the words are similar to those of the City of American Canyon's proclamation, I do want to read two paragraphs that I find incredibly powerful because it says exactly the values that the County of Napa is trying to live out today and every day. Juneteenth 2022, whereas recognizing Juneteenth is a time for reflection and conversation around growth, race, and equality. Napa County is proud to join our nation in honoring this day to promote and enhance the unity of our residents and stands in solidarity with all marginalized communities. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this 19th day of June 2022, I, Belia Ramos, on behalf of the 5th District, County of Napa, in the great state of California, do hereby recognize today as Juneteenth Day in Napa County and encourage all residents to pause, reflect, and embrace our shared journey of freedom and a unified understanding of one another's experiences, history, and culture. Thank you very much for bringing us together, for inviting us to share in this honor, in this solemn and joyful occasion.
It's really great to see all you guys out here. I know you all are from American Canyon. I don't think so. Okay. Even though you're not from American Canyon, I feel honored to have the opportunity to come out and say hello. Thanks for coming out to help celebrate a long-awaited occasion. Thanks to Brenda. It kind of brings joy to my heart to see everyone here and see some of my old friends still hanging around to keep us company. She spends a lot of time keeping things together in this city. I kind of feel like she inherited a little bit of that activity from me, but she does a better job. Brenda, thank you again for allowing me to get up here and let people know that I was once mayor. Enjoy yourself, guys. Enjoy it the best you can. And please come back next year.
And thank you, my dear. Thank you, thank you. He was on our city council for several years here in American Canyon. So now I want to present to you the publisher and CEO of the newspaper group, the Post News Group. Many of you know it as the Oakland Post back in the day. So let's give him a warm welcome of applause, Mr. Paul Cobb.
Happy Juneteenth Day and happy Father's Day. And a father wouldn't be nothing without a strong mother. So, you see this woman here in the yellow sweater taking pictures? You know who that is? That's Judge Trina Thompson, the new federal judge. And she is the federal judge here in Northern California, so all of you deadbeat dads might as well get your act together. Because you heard that expression, here come the judge? Well, there she is. Black women are taking over the judicial system in this country. That's one of the reasons why they wanted to keep us in slavery, because they know that black women will mete out justice. I am mindful of the heat, the music, the food, and the weather, so I am not going to talk 20 minutes, even though that's how much time that Brenda Knight allotted me. I'm going to do it in 6 or 7 minutes. But I want to tell you the historical significance. How many of you have seen or regularly get the Oakland Post or the Vallejo Post or the Vallejo Post? Well, part of the reason that I got invited here is that Brenda wants me to combine the American Canyon Post with the Vallejo Post. How many of you want to see that happen? Okay, well, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to briefly tell you about Juneteenth. It was in 1863, at New Year's Eve, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And that was the reason why there was so much joy and singing of Negro spirituals and other things, because how many of you ever heard of Watch Night? Watch Night was one of the most dreaded nights in the black community of slavery, because you did not know if you were going to be together with your family the next day. Because usually around January 1st, the plantation owners who would settle their debts would find a reason to sell the wife or the husband or the children back into slavery to pay their debts, or they would sell them to someone else. So when Abraham Lincoln signed, I guess that's a strong message. I better be careful how loud I mention Abraham Lincoln's name. So when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, there was great joy, but it took 2.5 years before a lot of the slaves on the plantation in Texas heard the news. And so, but when they heard the news, they started dancing, they started singing, and they said, Lord, have mercy. The time has come. And now, that is one of the reasons we have put this story, and I want you to read it, because what I was going to say is already printed in the paper that was distributed to you. One of the story is that black people were the soldiers that brought the news to the plantations in Texas. When they sent the news out, people immediately said, it's time for me to go. Thank the Lord that the day of Jubilee has arrived. The day of freedom has arrived. And so that's why, through the years, the notion of celebrating on Juneteenth Day came from the original news in Texas. A lot of people who migrated from Texas to Chicago, to California, elsewhere, they brought the celebration tradition with them. How many of you out here has relatives and family members that come from Texas? Raise your hand. In fact, there were so many black people in California that came from Texas that during the Watts riot in 1965, some people said it was the 3rd Ward and the 5th Ward of Houston rioting because there were that many people from Texas that had come to California. So Juneteenth, what we should be doing is celebrating. I want all of you who can to take a picture. Take a picture with Judge Trina Thompson. Take a picture with your friends here and put it on Facebook, put it on Twitter, put it on Instagram, put it everywhere to let everybody know that we are family and that we are starting to unite and hold up black girl magic that is helping to run this country now. That's one of the things that we should be doing to celebrate Juneteenth Day, not just partying, not just barbecuing, not just watermelon, but we should be doing that. I heard the lady, she just corrected my English or my English. I just created a new word called watermelon. Watermelon is when you cut the watermelon in half and just put your whole mouth in it and rub it all over your face, you know. But in 1965, 100 years after Juneteenth, Martin Luther King led a march in Selma, Alabama. That was my first assignment as a reporter for the Oakland Post. I went to Alabama, and I have pictures on my card that I'll pass out to those that might want them. But one of the gentlemen here who I met, while I was at the march in Alabama with Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy, I met the nephew of Ralph Abernathy, who was a part of the group that was singing to you this morning from Allen Temple Baptist Church, Ronald Abernathy. You should take a picture with him. You should make the history of those who have helped pave the way. It should become a real life example that you share. In a time when a lot of schools don't want our kids reading about freedom history, they're trying to get rid of the textbooks. They want to burn the books. They don't want black kids or white kids to know their history. We should use the modern technology to spread the word and to spread our history and to be proud of it. But we should also take advantage of this opportunity to provide service. We should be volunteering with the formerly incarcerated who are coming out of jail. And it's going to be very important. How many of you have been keeping up with the California Reparations Commission, where they've been talking about they want to provide reparations or money to repair the damage of slavery to the families in California that can trace their family roots to being that has relatives that suffered in slavery. And do you know that when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, there were 4 million black people in America, and they had their names are now in the National Black Museum in Washington, D.C., all 4 million names. And did you know, this is why those reparation hearings are important. Did you know that after slavery, after people were free, some of the slaves had saved up some nickels and some dimes and a few dollars. And they went to the bank. One of the first things they did after they were off the plantation, they had nowhere to go. They went to the bank to deposit those few nickels and dimes and pennies. And do you know that the white banks would not accept their money? So the government set up the Freedmen's Bank, and the Freedmen's Bank was chartered in all 11 states in the South, and 475,000 black people opened up savings accounts. And they were so prejudiced that even if you came in there with $100 to deposit, they would say, okay, we want to make sure you are who you say you are. What is your name, sir? My name is John. What is your last name? He said, well, I don't know, but since I was on Mr. Johnson's plantation, I guess you could say my last name is Johnson. So they wrote that down. And they said, were you ever married? And he said, yeah, I was married 3 times. Not because I had a lot of wives, it was because y'all kept selling my wife or selling me to somebody else, and I got married again. Do you have any kids? He said, yeah, as far as I know, I got 3 over here and 3 from this woman and 2 from that one. They wrote those names down. That was the first census of black Americans. Our name never appeared on the American census thing. And do you know that with those bank books, that's how they got a bank book. And that's what happened. And I went and did my research up at the Mormon temple and found out that my great-grandfather had opened up an account in Georgia for $200. And my great-grandfather on my mother's side had opened up one in Mississippi. And I want you to know that you will not believe that there were $57 million of black folks' nickels and dimes were deposited in that bank. And what do banks do with the money? They loan it out. And who do you think borrowed the money? White people. 90% of that money was lent to white people. And how many of you think they paid it back? Not a single dime. The bank was ultimately closed down by Congress, who started it, and black people were left holding an empty bank book. But the one thing that they have, and you can go online and find it by Googling your family tree name, that those bank books were put in the National Archives. And a group of white prisoners in Utah, took those 450,000 bank books and decoded the names on there and all the writing and put it on a database. And they found out that 1 out of every 3 black Americans living in this country now can trace their family tree to one of those bank books. And do you know how much $57 million in today's money is from 1865? Hundreds of billions of dollars. It's enough money for 1 out of 3 black people. I think the microphone is telling me now that I start mentioning all that money, my time has run out. No. But, so he gave me 1 more minute. But I want you to realize that Juneteenth Day is an opportunity for us to take an account of our family tree. It is important to start finding out, did I have relatives in Alabama, Mississippi, in Georgia, or Oklahoma, or Texas, or wherever, Virginia, or wherever, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida. And if you do, you are likely to have, and the federal government now, that's why the congressperson who came here, and that's why the mayor and all of them, they need to start passing resolutions saying we support the relatives of the families who can trace their family tree to one of those bank books so they can get their money. They can get their reparations. They can get what the country owes, because Congress was supposed to have backed that up and Congress left them holding the bag. And I'm going to close by saying this one thing. Some of the white companies and individuals that borrowed that money, some of their corporations are still in existence. And this is what's going to blow your mind. The chairperson of the committee that was in charge of it, you want to know what his last name was? Chase.
J.P. Morgan.
And do you want to know that the Northern Pacific Railroad today got their money and their start from former slave savings and never paid it back?
That's right.
Do you know that Aetna and that Colonial Life Insurance Company, why do you think they paid $14 million for the floating museum on slavery? It was out of guilt when they found out that the public knew that they didn't pay it. Cooper Brothers Tires. There are hundreds of companies and individuals that borrowed slavery money and never paid it back.
Right.
Juneteenth ought to be a day of opening our eyes.
That's it.
And Juneteenth should be a time to celebrate. It should be a time to party. But like Deion Sanders said, it's got to be about the money too. And I want you all to know that the Post is going to be doing some stories from now every week till the next 3 to 5 years, and we're going to be taking pictures of black families that have reunited and rediscovered their roots. And already, how many of you have heard of Lay's potato chips? Do you know that Lay's potato chips, there's a white Lay and there's a black Lay? And the man who owns Lay's potato chips has an annual meeting of all the family reunion, and they all get together and he hands out checks to them because he's a billionaire. But then the last time they had a family reunion, he said, I got a surprise for everybody. And he showed them the black Lay side of the family. And there are a lot of now black millionaires from that side because the guilt of having borrowed slave money and using it to become rich is now starting to catch up with them. It's almost like a financial DNA chart that you can trace the lineage and you can find out. And that's what the Post newspaper is going to be doing. And if you're doing your family research, you let us know. Send us the pictures. We will publish them. We will start showing people how they can go back and claim their roots. Then you can jump up on the table and do the money dance. All right. I have gone and taken more time than I'm supposed to. I appreciate it. I will give my cards to those who might want them. If you have a story that you want us to publish and write about in the Vallejo papers or in the Oakland Post or the Stockton Post or San Francisco, Marin County, Berkeley, South County, we have El Mundo, our Spanish language paper. So we are here to help spread not only the joy of Juneteenth, not only the pain of how we suffered, but we are going to give examples of what people are doing to celebrate by volunteer to do service to youth groups and with their churches. I want to thank you for the time and the opportunity.
Come on, let's give it up for Ken Styles, DJing and keeping us going this afternoon. All right, as we continue this train molding through this Jubilee, the Juneteenth Festival, the first and annual American Canyon. This next, we're getting ready to do jazz as we celebrate the origin of jazz. Jazz originated in the late 19th to early 20th century as interpretations of American and European classical music entwined with Africa and African enslaved folk songs and the influences of West African culture. Is jazz originally from Africa? Jazz was born out of and evolved through the African American experience in that U.S. Jazz evolved from slave songs and spirituals, religious African American folk songs. Jazz originators and most important innovators were primarily African Americans. We knew that. How did jazz get its name? The word jazz probably derives from the slang word jasm, which originally meant energy, vitality, spirit, pep. The Oxford Dictionary, the most reliable and complete record of the English language, traces jasm back to at least 1860. How was jazz born? When did jazz originate? Of course, jazz wasn't born on a particular day. It was created over time. It was a meeting, a mixing, a melding of many cultures, many emotions, and many skills. Some say jazz grew out of drumming and voodoo rituals that took place in New Orleans, Congo Square, before the Civil War. Who really invented jazz? Buddy Bolden, as some of the record says, an African-American band leader called the first man of jazz. By historian Donald M. Marquis, was at the forefront of jazz movement. Bolden played the cornet in the dance halls during the day and in the red light district of New Orleans, Storyville, late at night. How New Orleans became the breeding ground for a uniquely American art form? It all started in 1819 in Congo Square, an outdoor space in New Orleans where slaves would congregate on Sundays when they didn't have to work. According to the Ken Burns documentary Jazz, they would sing, play music, and dance and swaying back and forth to songs of their home countries. Caribbean music from the West Indies, mixed with beats from Africa and church melodies from the United States South. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, the stages were overtaken by racist minstrel shows in which white performers sang and danced in blackface to upbeat tunes. And all the while, the sound of the brass marching band provided a soundtrack to the ongoing American Civil War. And so, as we know part of that history, again, I encourage you to do your research to learn a little bit more, and our kids learn more about jazz. We've already concluded with the ritual, the spirituals, the gospel, and now we're coming down to jazz. And there's so many different forms, right? The bebop, the gypsy jazz, hard bop, cool jazz, model jazz, Latin jazz, and so many other forms. The swing, as you know it.
I'd like for you to join us. It's the Afro National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Well, sing a song for that the darkness has brought us. Sing a song full of the hope and the present brought us. Everything is son of the new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Sing a song full of faith that the darkness is brought us. Sing a song full of the hope and the present taught us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won. Amen.
Well, I've enjoyed myself. It's a nice day. The camaraderie was excellent. The people look good. All these black folks and white folks and everybody else. It's a good to come together. And I'm very happy and thankful I'm alive to be able to share with it.
So what we're getting ready to do now is a little park participation. We're getting ready to do a little, you guys gonna have to move to the side for a minute because we're getting ready to fill in this area here with some old school music that get the old school up partying, I guarantee you. So, are you ready, DJ? Because I'm getting ready to come out there. Are you ready? Let's pump it up. Let's pump it up. Uh-oh.
Oh, shuck it now.
Oh, come on down.
Y'all know how to wobble. Come on, y'all.
Come on
Get up
down.
off them seats and wobble to the grass and shake your.
All right, come on down. Here we go. Here we go.
All right.
Oh! 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 All the shorties in the club, let me see you just back it up, drop it down. Let me see you just get low, scrub the ground. Let me see you just push it up, let me see you just
wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble.
get it up, 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 get it up.
Hey, big girl, make a bag it up. Make a bag it up. Hey, big girl,
come on, y'all.
Bag it up. Make a bag it up.
Let the village wobble.
Girl, make a bag it up.
Come on, village.
Make 'em back it up.
The village dance.
Big girl, make 'em
Everybody.
make 'em back it up. Back it up.
I got them shaking their booties like Congos, man. I'm shaking the city like quakes. Yeah. Haters blue in the face like Gonzo, cause I'm breaking the cake, so let's bake. Yeah. I'm
Where's some of them brothers?
The game's mine.
You know our queen sisters gonna get up on that. Where's some of them brothers?
Yeah,
Come on
to
down.
the game, but y'all might wanna say you whack raps, daylight saving time. I can dance all day, I don't two-step. Y'all looking at something like a true player. A girl told me that a man that can dance might can possibly get down with the tool in his pants. Now I'm a ladies, let me see it vibrate. And when it's over, you
See
ain't
what you y'all doing?
Cause I'm a pro.
Y'all going all the way back to the motherland. This ain't new. Ha! Come on, queen sisters. Come on, brothers. King brothers. Hey, hey. Hey, hey.
Get it now. Yeah, yeah. Get it now. Yeah, yeah. Get it now. Yeah, yeah. Get it now. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, big girl, make 'em back it up. Make 'em back it up. Hey, big girl, make 'em back it up. Make 'em back it up. Hey, big girl.
Somebody wonder, hey Ken, some people wonder how we get through the week. Sometimes when people want to know how black folks make it through the week, sometimes we gotta wobble out it, wobble out it, wobble out it, wobble out it.
The girl say, man, like they the right shit. Damn, I'm so expensive, but I can't help my flow.
Sometimes we gotta cute each
got a
other.
gift like it gotta be Christmas. I swag on this like it gotta be gifted. The girls want cameras and they want pictures, and they gonna frame up to see that. Now I'm in the bed while I'm saying my scriptures. Cause I be holy like you pray in the temple. Wanna be, I move with the letter of a pencil. And I ain't won't miss you, good night kiss you. Take a damn ride, cause you got pistol. And I don't think about it, pick her up these issues.
Baby wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble. Wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble. Wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble. Wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble, baby wobble.
Get up now. Yeah, yeah. Get up now. Yeah, yeah. Get it now.
Ooh, this looks good.
Yeah, get it now. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, big girl, make 'em back it up. Make 'em back it up. Hey, big girl, make 'em back it up. Make 'em back it up. Hey, big girl, make 'em back it up. Make 'em back it up. Hey, big girl, make 'em back it up. Make 'em back it up. Back it up. Back it up.
I'm Barbara Harvey, and I've been with Brenda for about 22 years. When she started out small, now she's really big. And I have enjoyed traveling with her. I love to go to her luncheons, her gospels, and I'm enjoying myself today. Chilling.
And let's welcome Miss Regina Mason. Let's give her a round of applause.
All right, all right, all right.
Well, good afternoon, American Canyon community. Can y'all hear me? All right. Listen, I want to thank Brenda Knight, this tireless woman, this extraordinary woman, for putting on this fabulous event. I am honored to be here. Happy Juneteenth and happy Father's Day to you wonderful fathers out there.
So how do you get back on track?
I am here to tell you an amazing story, which is my personal journey to reclaim for my family and the nation the first fugitive slave narrative in American history. Now, this journey goes all the way back to 1971 when I was in the 5th grade at St. Augustine School in Oakland, California. A class assignment forced me to look squarely at American slavery when it showed up in my family tree. I was amazed to find out that my mother's grandfather had been enslaved in Richmond, Virginia towards the end of slavery. And she knew this man. Well, it surprised me for 2 reasons. One, slavery had never been talked about in my family. And second of all, I was amazed that my mother could actually touch and knew her great-grandfather. But that was just the beginning of me learning about my enslaved heritage. It was very bittersweet because I had this assignment to go and tell my classmates about my heritage, and I didn't want to talk about slavery. I didn't want to talk about bondage, any of those things. So I was also angry. Well, my mother, who didn't know much about the family history outside of her grandfather, took me to see my Aunt Catherine, who was the family historian. Now, I say that with all the love and affection, but I want you to know that every family should have a family historian. If you don't have one, you lose. You don't win without knowing where you come from and who your people were. So I encourage all of you, especially in this digital age, to seek your history. So when my mother took me to see my Aunt Catherine, this loving woman told me 3 little clues that stayed with me forever. She told me, she said, you know, we had an ancestor who was from New Haven, Connecticut, who had a connection to the Underground Railroad, and his name was Grimes. That was huge to me. I'm in 5th grade, y'all. 5th grade, that's when you learn about American slavery. That's when you learn about American history. That's when you learn, or should be learning, about the Underground Railroad. So when she told me that little thread of a story, I begged her for more information. Why? Because it was a resistance story. It was a story I needed to hear. It was a story that said we didn't sit down for slavery. We fought against it. I wanted to know more information, but she had given me all she knew. For 20 years, that little story played on and off in my mind until I was a young wife and mother of 2 little girls. And I never wanted them to stand in front of their classroom feeling inadequate because they didn't have a history to be proud of. So I went searching for this man, this person who was only known as Grimes. And one day, after many years of research, in fact, it would take me 15 years. This is before the digital age. This is before Ancestry.com, so there's no excuse for anybody out there. Information is at your fingertips. Information is on demand. I didn't have that. I was in the dusty archives. It took me 15 years to research this story and carried me thousands of miles away from home. And one day, as my little girl sat for library time, I went looking in on the bookshelves, and I came across a book by Charles L. Blockson, and I turned immediately to the New England section, and he said, William Grimes stowed away on a vessel from Savannah, Georgia, and made his way to New York. And from New York, he was put in contact with Underground Railroad workers who directed him to New Haven, Connecticut. Now, if you were listening to me, you heard me say the Grimes surname. You heard me say the Underground Railroad. And you heard me say New Haven, Connecticut. All of those points leapt out at me in a simple paragraph. I had to find this man. Was he my ancestor? Well, it turns out in Charles L. Blockson's book, this man had written his life story and published it himself. I had to find this book, Life of William Grimes, the Runaway Slave, written in 1825 when African American autobiography was rare. I found this book at Cody's bookstore in Berkeley, California. Cody's is not there anymore, but his narrative was republished in 1971 when I was going through my ordeal of not feeling good about my history. It was as if that book was on that shelf waiting for me to discover it. And no one in my family knew that our ancestor had written his life story. Well, it would take a lot of years to uncover the truth and connect the dots, but I did do that. And I was able to partner with a scholar on early African American autobiography. His name is Bill Andrews from UNC Chapel Hill, and he was the only living scholar that wrote about William Grimes, and what he wrote was only 2 pages long. So I was sharing then information to this scholar who knew nothing about this slave narrative. And then one day he said to me, we ought to team up. We should partner. We need to republish this book. And in 2008, all of my hard work and sacrifice paid off. This is the Grimes narrative. When I partnered with Bill Andrews, I learned just how precedent-setting his narrative is, and I want you all to hear this. William Grimes was the first enslaved person to go through slavery in the South and write about it. Now wrap your mind around that. Prior to that, any word about American slavery came from the enslaver. We were not given voice to tell our plight, but this man found a way to do it. William Grimes is the first fugitive slave narrative to bear the title written by himself. Understand how revolutionary that was, to have boldly put on the cover of your book, I wrote this myself, which meant that he was saying, I am literate, I can do this. I don't need any white person to corroborate my story, to help me write it. I can do it myself. The Grimes narrative is precedent-setting for this time. I will tell you why. He writes about the prison system so early on in his narrative that would one day eventually become the prison system that we see today. He writes about the brutality of enslavement, the overseer, the slave drivers. He talks about plantation slavery. He was enslaved under 10 different masters because he was rebellious. He talks about how hard it was for a black person to carve out a free existence in the quote-unquote free North. No other slave narrative did that. And to put this book into perspective, he also tells you, or when we peg it on a timeline, we find out again how important and precedenting this man's work is. It came out 8 years before any organized American anti-slavery movement. So when nobody was professing freedom for African Americans, he was. We also know that his book predates the first African American newspaper in this country, Freedom's Journal, out of New York City. He told his story before then. He told his story before Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831 in Southampton, Virginia. So for this book to lay dormant for almost 160 years before I found it, no other scholar was able to take this book to the height that I took it. So I'm saying to you today, if you do not know your history, you are lost. Carter G. Woodson once said, those who have no record of their ancestors' accomplishments lose the inspiration that comes from the teaching of biography and history. Again, those who have no record of what their forebears accomplished lose the inspiration that comes from the teachings of biography and history. People, you cannot be inspired from a biography that was never written. You cannot be inspired by a history that was never recorded. This is why genealogy is so important for the African American, because genealogy has the power to reclaim what was lost. When we reclaim the stories of those deemed marginal and insignificant, we honor them. And by extension, they help fortify us and make us whole. I'm going to end my talk with a passage from William Grimes. This is when his final master discovers that he's living in New Haven, Connecticut. He finds William Grimes and he demands that you either pay for your freedom or you be re-enslaved. William Grimes by this time was a husband. He was married to a woman of color, a black woman he loved dearly, whose father served in the American Revolutionary War. We don't learn that in school. We don't. I would have stood proudly in front of my classmates to tell them that I was a descendant of a patriot who served in the American Revolutionary War. His son served in the Civil War. I would have gladly stood in front, but I didn't know my history. But I know it now. My children know it, and I got a new great-grandbaby. No, not a great-grandbaby, but a granddaughter. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about my mother, who will know her story. So here, at the end of his life, not his life, but at the end of his journey to be a free man of color in the free North, he has forced to give up the deed to his home. He had nothing left but his story, and he sat down to write his story, hoping that he would recoup some of the money that was lost. And he writes this: I hope some will buy my books from charity, but I am no beggar. I am now entirely destitute of property. Where and how I shall live, I don't know. Where and how I shall die, I don't know. But I hope I may be prepared. If it were not for the stripes on my back, which were made while I was a slave, I would, in my will, leave my skin as a legacy to the government, desiring that it might be taken off and made into parchment, and then bind the Constitution of glorious, happy, and free America. Let the skin of an American slave bind the charter of American liberty. William Grimes was an ordinary man who did an extraordinary thing. By writing his story in his own words, he boldly inserted himself into American history. And I have followed his legacy. I now have a film out called Gina's Journey, The Search for William Grimes, that is on Amazon Prime. William Grimes didn't know how he was going to write his story. I didn't know how I was going to make a film. But I found a way. He was my inspiration. I didn't know who was going to publish my book. By the grace of God, all the pieces came into play. You see, when your vision or your inspiration is noble, the heavens open up for you. And that has been my journey, and that has been my journey, or William Grimes' journey as well. I want to thank you all for hearing my story. And if you are inclined to want to read the Grimes narrative, I do have it over here for sale. Thank you so much.
Everybody, happy Juneteenth here in American Canyon. We're having a good time. It's the first annual Juneteenth in American Canyon. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Chrissy Max at Chrissy Max Place.
Sarah Rush is the great-great-granddaughter to Booker T. Washington. Let's welcome Miss Sarah Rush.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Okay, I'm not going to keep you too long because I know it's been a long day, but I want to thank Brenda Knight for inviting me to this first annual Juneteenth event. And just to clarify, I'm actually the great-granddaughter, so one great. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who he was and things that maybe you didn't know about him as quickly as I can. I consider it a privilege anytime I get a chance to talk about him, because I know the only reason that I can stand here today is because he and so many of our great ancestors stood in unimaginable conditions long time ago. But unfortunately for me, I didn't completely understand all that my great-grandfather achieved until I was a young adult, and I stepped on the campus of Tuskegee University for the first time in my life. And we were there for our first Booker T. Washington family reunion. My mother, his granddaughter, she was born and raised right across the street from the school, and she's buried there now on the lawn in the campus cemetery, along with George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, her parents, and many significant others. But by the time I was born, she didn't talk much about her grandfather, and she didn't talk much about what it was like growing up right there in the midst, on the wake of his death, right there where it all took place for him. So I didn't know that he was able to rise above slavery to become a famous educator. He was advisor to 3 U.S. presidents, and he was a best-selling author. His book, Up From Slavery, was translated into over 17 different languages, and it has never been out of print. And I didn't know that he was the first African-American on a 50-cent piece and on a U.S. coin, or how he was considered the most influential black leader of his time. He had over 10 million followers, and that was without Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And growing up, not realizing the greatness in my bloodline created a huge void in my life, and it led to me making some poor choices while looking for myself in all the wrong places. There was a blurb or two in the textbooks about him, but nothing compared to what I was about to learn on that campus in Tuskegee. And it literally changed my life. So when we first arrived, there were news reporters, there were community members, there were city leaders, students, faculty, and they were all there to welcome us. And they were asking for our autographs, they wanted to take pictures, and some just wanted to talk and get to know us. And I was awestruck that this was taking place, and I was like, Mom, what is this? I didn't know what all the people who surrounded me knew about my grandfather. So out of everything I learned during that visit, I was most inspired by the original buildings that were built by Booker T. Washington and his students, all former slaves. And these buildings were built by hand using bricks that they made. And the bricks were of such superior quality that people came from miles around to purchase them. And Booker T. Washington would take that money that they paid for the bricks, he put it back into the school, giving his students their first lesson in business and in finance. So it never ceases to amaze me how our ancestors were able to do so much more with so much less at their hands than we have today. But I believe one reason is because they didn't just sit back, they didn't just talk, they didn't just complain, but they actually stepped up. And that, like Booker T. Washington, who committed his entire life to preparing his students to rise successfully above slavery and become truly free. He said, and I quote, "It is important and right that all privileges of law be ours, but it is vastly more important that we be prepared for these rights and privileges." So to understand his philosophy, as with anything else, it must be placed in its proper context of the times in which he lived, which were the mid-1800s to the early 1900s. So today I'm just going to share quickly his philosophy of the education of the head, hand, and the heart that he used to uplift his former slaves and their descendants. And the head represented character building and academics, the hand represented the integrity of work, and the heart represented service to others. So starting with the head, he once said, it is not possible to improve the condition in any race until the mind is awakened and improved. It makes sense that he would say that, considering when he was a child in slavery, his only desire was to be able to go to school. He just wanted to get into school because one of his slave duties was to carry the books of his master's children as he followed behind them to the schoolhouse. And once they went inside, he would stand outside around the schoolhouse and try to hear what the teacher was teaching. But he'd run away before getting caught because at the time, a slave learning to read or write was a crime. And it was a crime that could be punishable by death. But he knew then what is still true today, that knowledge is power. And one of his earliest memories was waking up every morning in a one-room slave cabin with no windows and dirt floors to the fervent prayers of his mother, down on her knees praying for their freedom. And her prayers were answered when slavery ended when Booker T. Washington was 9 years old. So fast forwarding to when he was 16, he traveled nearly 500 miles, mostly by foot, to Hampton Institute to gain his formal education. And it was there that his character and his mind was strengthened. And he graduated 3 years later with honors. After graduating, he was eager to improve the lives of former slaves who continued to struggle and live in poverty. That desire was fulfilled when he opened Tuskegee Institute at the age of 25 on July 4th of July, 1981, in an old dilapidated church. Some people mistakenly think that he only wanted to teach blacks to continue to be slaves, but there is nothing further from the truth. Again, we must consider the context. When he first arrived in Tuskegee, he traveled outside of the area where the school was to open, and he traveled into the rural country districts because he wanted to explore the life of the people and discover what they needed.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And what he saw surprised even him, and he was a former slave. Although he experienced poverty in his life, he'd never seen the extremes of poverty he now saw in rural Alabama. There were children that they were outside, they were completely naked. And the ones who wore clothing, he said that it was so black and greasy, it was only one piece, that it didn't even resemble cloth. So although he described these families as being extremely poor and illiterate, he said that he was still encouraged to help them because they recognized their weaknesses and they had the desire to improve their condition. And so that leads to the hand, which represents the integrity of work. He said, we must not only become reliable, progressive, skillful, and intelligent, but we must keep the idea constantly before our youth that all forms of labor, whether with the head or the hand, are honorable. So in the beginning, the first students, they were excited that they were getting ready to become educated. They thought that that meant they weren't going to have to do any more hard labor after hundreds of years of slavery. But Booker T. Washington had other plans. So when he told them that they were going to cut down the trees, the droves of trees, to make room on the land to build their own buildings and grow their own food, they were livid. And they protested loudly. But when he picked up the first axe and led the way through the forest of the trees, they quietly and willingly followed. It's important to understand that many of his first students were unable to read or write, and some of them didn't even know how to properly use a toothbrush. Yet among them, he turned out some of the most upstanding and model citizens. Many went on to become business, land, and property owners. So he didn't do that because he wanted them to be slaves. He did it because he wanted them to become self-reliant. He only recruited the best and the brightest minds to work with the students. For instance, he recruited Robert Taylor, the first African-American graduate of MIT, was recruited to develop the industrial training program. And he recruited the renowned scientist, George Washington Carver, to head up the agricultural department. And just those two names alone to tell you that he didn't do it to instill a mindset of slavery, but instead his goal was to instill excellence. And in the book Christian Business Legends, they cite that by 1905, Tuskegee produced more self-made millionaires than Harvard, Princeton, and Yale combined. Perhaps that's why Martin Luther King Jr. in his 65 speech said, "From an old slave cabin in Virginia Hills, Booker T. Washington rose to become one of America's greatest leaders. He lit a torch in Alabama and darkness fled." Which leads to the last part of the philosophy, the heart, giving back in service to others. Booker T. Washington contributed not only to Tuskegee, but he contributed to providing educations for Blacks all over the country. And how was he able to do that? I'm glad you asked. Primarily, he was keen at fundraising, and he was able to forge close bonds with the wealthiest of men, including Carnegie, Rockefeller, and George Eastman, the founder of Kodak. And he persuaded them to donate millions for the education of African Americans. And near the end of his life, in 1913, he convinced Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears Roebuck, to put up the money to build state-of-the-art schools called Rosenwald Schools for Black students all over the South. Washington oversaw everything from the construction to the curriculum, and again he appointed Robert Taylor to head up the architecture. The schools continued to be built well after Washington's death in 1915, and by 1932 there were nearly 5,000 schools built in the United States. The late Congressman John Lewis and poet Maya Angelou were two of the many proud graduates of Rosenwald schools. He also founded the National Negro Business League to promote interests of Black business owners. And by 1905, there were more than 600 chapters in 34 states, and it's still in existence today. It's known as the National Business League today. And speaking of this organization, for those who saw the Madam C.J. Walker film, Self-Made, I'd just like to take one moment to clear something up that he was grossly mischaracterized in that film. I don't have time to go into it, but even her great-great-great-granddaughter, Alelia Bundos, said her book is what the movie was based on, and she said that there is no mention in her book or any record of him ever making those sexist remarks that they portrayed him to have said in the movie. And I believe these types of mischaracterizations only create division, and it does a disservice to our history. Speaking of division, as I bring it to a close, I'll briefly address what I hear most often when people find out that I'm the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, and that's about his relationship with Du Bois. Although it is well known that they disagreed, it's not so well known that they had a mutual respect for one another. So just to give you one example, when Booker T. Washington died, Du Bois wrote a tribute in the NAACP Crisis magazine saying, and this is just in part, he said, "He was the greatest Negro leader since Frederick Douglass and the most distinguished man, white or Black, to come out of the South since the Civil War." So the controversy was more between their followers than it was between the two of them. And fortunately, Booker T. Washington, he didn't let any of that distract him or get in his way. Instead, he left this advice. He said, "The thing to do when one feels sure he has said or done the right thing and is condemned is to stand and keep quiet. If he is right, time will show it." And because he stood, Tuskegee University still stands today, more than 140 years later, and more importantly, as an HBCU, it continues to produce thousands upon thousands of great minds who come back into our communities as leaders, as mentors and role models for the next generation of leaders. So I thank God that I finally learned how my great-grandfather and our ancestors, many of our ancestors, stood in unimaginable conditions so I can stand here and so that we can all stand today. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you, and God bless you.
One of my favorite bands with all that blues and all that red, the West Coast Caravan of All Stars.
She's an out. What is she? How you guys feeling today? You feeling all right out there? Say you're feeling all right out there. Ooh. They got a little different groove on this thing, but I like it. Ooh. No, she didn't bad enough. As I packed my thing to leave, thought she'd break down and cry. Baby, sit around my room and y'all forget to move it this time. Acting like I was the last thing a home run. Well, I would like start all over again. Oh, baby, I cannot train my mind. As I took those steps, yeah, toward that open door, knowing all the time, oh Lord, see, I really didn't want to go now. She didn't give me no sign, no, nothing to help me change my mind. And I would start all over again. Baby, can I change my mind? Can somebody play something? Lord, I played my game so many times before. People, let me tell you the truth. Truth is that I really didn't want to still get cool out sometimes. Look like for my baby, but there's nowhere inside. Till I would not start all over again. Hey, baby, can I change my mind? I ain't right, 'cause I found out what love's all about. Yeah, well, hell, I reached a turning point in my life. I reached a turning point in my life. Anybody know what that means? Anybody know what that means? That means no more tipping uptown. That means no more messing around. When you find that turning point, and I don't care how good the neighbor look to you, if she come over and she say, you know what, I noticed that your woman just left. And I know she's going to the store, because it's on that schedule. She be gone for an hour or so. But I just want to let you know, I like the way you wash your car. Can I come in? I just got something I want to show you. What you gonna say? You say, get off my boat. That's it. If you love solid, get away from my door. That's what you say. Break it down one more time. Hey, ladies. Can't hear you. Try again. Hey, ladies. This is for you. And all you do. Listen up now. If your man doing all he can to take care of you, to be good to you, making sure there's food in the refrigerator. When you turn the lights on, they come on. Turn the water faucet and the water's flow. Your man taking you uptown, downtown, showing you around. Somebody know what I'm talking about. Whining and dining. You gotta get that back. Just like that. You gotta kill that back when he comes home. Meet him with a smile. If he's tired, you wanna rub his back. If he's real tired, take his shoes off and massage his feet. Give him a treat. Somebody know what I'm talking about. Treat him like a saint, even though he. If you got a pet in the house and that monster beat you to the door, you not doing your job. All right, now. Hey, fellas. Hey, fellas. When your baby, when she needs your love, you just give it up. You just give it up. She put it right down. You right down. Push it. Change my mind. I wanna change my mind. Nah. What a G. What a G.
Can we give it up for Orlando Harris?
All right. Yes. Top shelf, y'all can start. Y'all can start.
No, I'm not top shelf. But first of all, Brenda, what an amazing opportunity to participate in the first ever Juneteenth celebration here in American Canyon. Thanks to the hard work of Brenda Knight, the planning committee, sponsors, supporters, and thanks to all of you for being here. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say happy birthday to my son, Gabriel Harris, who was born 17 years ago today, Juneteenth on Father's Day. And so happy birthday, Gabriel. As Brenda said, yes, I'm a relative of Rosa Parks. My grandmother, Carrie Arrington, and Rosa were first cousins. I was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama. But I want you to imagine something. I want you to just imagine, if you will, you take the same bus every day at the exact same time. You're tired, you're exhausted, and simply ready to just get home. Your route is exactly the same, but in your mind, you still ask yourself, are we there yet? If you've ever had the chance to travel with kids on a road trip, you know before you depart that that particular question may be heard numerous times prior to your destination. Speaking of destinations, I would like to ask, are we there yet? Since the first slaves arrived on the shores of America in 1619, you can imagine the hurt and hardship associated with that one question, that simple question. Unfortunately, 400 plus years later, we still find ourselves asking that same question, although in a slightly different context. But still, are we there yet? Although today is a wonderful day of celebration, we should all challenge ourselves to remember that we have not arrived yet. that the arrival of being there would mean that we truly hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I ask you again, are we there yet? We can't be there until every child in this country knows that they can be whatever they desire, regardless of gender, beliefs, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or color. We can't be there yet until we can trust that our politicians work towards, that they truly work towards for all Americans and not just those who decide to scale a wall at the Capitol because they refuse to accept the majority outcome. Oh, I just want you to hear the cries and hear the moans of our ancestors strapped to the bottom of those slave ships, speaking in their native tongue. Now, I have no idea where I'm being taken, but are we there yet? Can you hear them? Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Galatians 13 says, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh, rather serve one another humbly in love. Verse 14 states, for the eternal law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment, love your neighbors as yourself. Now, more than ever, we can clearly see that there are those who propose to love Christ but do not live by his commands. They're the same ones that keep their knees on the necks of others. The actions of the hardened hearts are the very souls that would rather we stay here and never get there. But we must not relinquish our hopes and dreams. The hopes and dreams of those who came before us. They refused to go to the back of the bus. They went to the mountaintop. They saw the other side, yet they remained unafraid when knowing that they might not get there. They refused to be bound to slavery and then kept coming back over and over and over again to free others. We must demand that our country live up to its ideals and words written so long ago in the Constitution. Ratified in 1868, the 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States of America, including former enslaved people, and guaranteed all citizens equal protection under the law. And so I ask you again, are we there yet? Well, no. But my hope lives in my faith that things will get better, that we will heal as a nation, that we remain obedient in all that we do. A Christian's hope isn't an escape or wishful thinking, as C.S. Lewis says, but something that a Christian is meant to do. We have hope in eternal life, which means that we can attack today with a renewed vigor and strength. Hebrews 11, verse 1 states the following truth. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. We're not there yet, but it doesn't mean we can't get there. I personally refuse to live without hope and a belief. I have a belief that yes, we will get there. Happy Juneteenth, American Canyon.
Next, we have speaking Lanice Spann from NARAB Realist, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Lanice?
How's everybody doing out there? All right? My name is Lanice Spann. I am actually one of the first black families that have moved to American Canyon. I moved to American Canyon when I was 6 years old, and I am now 58. So there's been a whole lot of changes going on. Yeah. Oh, speaking to it? Okay. American Canyon has a lot of changes. I've seen a lot, and there's more to come. I'm here to talk about NARAB. I am a local realtor and a Bay Area realtor as well. NAREB, N-A-R-E-B, is the largest African American trade association in America. The National Association of Real Estate Brokers was founded in Tampa, Florida in 1947 as an equal, was founded in Florida in 1947 as an equal opportunity and civil rights advocacy organization for African Americans, real estate professionals, consumers, and communities in America. The purpose of NARAB is to enhance the economic improvement of its members, the community at large, and the minority community which it serves. To unite those engaged in recognized branches of the real estate industry, including brokerages, management, mortgage financing, appraising, land development, home building, and allied fields for the purpose of exerting influence on real estate interests. Although composed principally of African Americans, the realist organization embraces all quality and nationalities who are committed to achieve our vision which is democracy in housing. Local black professional and real estate groups began forming in northern and southern communities in the 1880s. Now, I belong to the Solano Realist chapter. We're all over the place. We're nationwide. And Don Johnson is the president over Solano Realist. So NARAB has played various influence roles in implementing of equal rights for fair housing, equal opportunity and community development legislation at our local, state, and federal levels since it's been founded. NARAB continues to open doors that otherwise would remain closed to African American professionals and of consumers and community image with local and national government. NARAB continues to strive to preserve and enhance its industry and the community image with local and national government, business and consumer interests organizations focusing on real estate and community development. We focus on professional practices on serving the needs of the undeserved. Now, home ownership, black home ownership is very important. We are very behind. We need to close the gap, y'all. We need to close the gap. We, as realists in NARAB, we promote black generational wealth. Hand it down to your family. Don't sell it. If you sell it, buy something else. Keep buying it because that is the way you build wealth. When your neighbor, when you get your house appraised and your same square footage and everything, and your neighbor gets a higher value than you, we fight for that. We fight for the injustice of what's going on.
And I'm very happy to be here on this first celebration of Juneteenth in American Canyon.
One day, when the war is done, we will be one. We will be one. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh, glory.
glory, 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 glory.
A hands to the heaven, no man, no weapon formed against us, yes, glorious destiny. Every day, women and men become legends. Sins against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom's like religion to us. Justice is just a position to us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, the spirit visited in us. True living in us, riches in us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walked through Ferguson with our hands up.
One day, when the war is won, we will be one. We will be one. Oh, glory, 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 glory. When the day is won, we shall all come. We will be one. We will be one. Glory, glory, oh glory, 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 glory.
Listen now while I give you a little history, so you will know more about this mystery. In 1862, Lincoln worked on an emancipation. With the stroke of a pen, he wrote a proclamation. Those held as slaves shall be free. This was signed in 1863. But some slaves continued to work, toil, and die because no one told them until 1865. Remember your history, or you will forget it took additional laws to get what was meant. From slavery to citizenship, please take a note. In 1870, black men got a right to vote. With the stroke of a pen by President Joe Biden, we forever have Juneteenth history. Welcome to the story we call victory.
Glory, oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be one, we will be one, oh, glory, 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 oh, glory, 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 oh, glory, glory. Glory, 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 glory. Glory, glory, yeah, yeah, glory, 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 glory.
Happy Juneteenth, y'all.
Good night, so long. It's time to go. You got to get up out of here because it's over. We went overtime. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Come on,
we'll
give
see
everybody,
you
give
this
yourself
time
a
next
hand.
year.
And Sister Brenda Knight Productions. Come on, let's give her a hand. Good night, good afternoon, good evening, from sun up to sundown. May God bless you. May he keep you. May the wind be to your back and be home safe is our prayer. Until next year, glory. And remember our people.
What an incredible day here at American Canyon for Juneteenth. Beautiful celebration. Huge turnout, great food, music, and most of all, how to tell the story.
When I move my body just like this, I don't know why, but I feel like freedom. I hear a song that takes me back